Okay, so I am joined today with my friend Philip Chase again as we continue our discussion of Vinland Saga. We are discussing book 9 this time. And Philip, there's a lot less symbolism on this cover. Do you
Yes,
want to chat about it for a minute?
that is true. I think this cover is just basically emphasizing a very important character in book
Mm-hmm.
nine, the character who kind of steals the show for me, actually, in this book, which is great. And that is, of course, Hild. We
Yes.
discussed her at the tail end of the previous discussion on book 8, because that's where she appears. But
Mm-hmm.
here is where we really get to see her highlighted. And so it's
Yes.
appropriate that she's on the cover with her really cool homemade crossbow.
Oh, she's so cool.
Yeah. I had to look up if crossbows were actually they were just being introduced in that part of Europe.
Yeah, she invented them.
She invented them, exactly. So,
That's historical.
yeah. Never mind how historically accurate that may or may not be. We're going with it. So
Exactly. Which I forgot to mention, we did our discussion of book 8 over on your channel, and that's already live, so that'll be linked in the description. Make sure to check that out first for the beginning of this arc. And now we're continuing the discussion. And we actually left off the last discussion, kind of cutting it off early where Hild was introduced.
yeah,
But in the last book, and in the beginning of this book, Hild has helped them to kill and eat a bear, and then let them know, by the way, you're poisoned, which is a
yeah. By the
great
way,
introduction for a character.
yeah. She does come in with a bang there, doesn't she? Yeah. And of
And
course, we learn that the reason for this is that she is someone from Thorfinn's past.
right, yes, and she, much like we discussed in the last arc, is following the mantra of a Viking, the obligation to avenge those that have
Yeah.
been killed, which I loved that he decided to go that route, that, as he's exploring the freedom, like the chains put on a woman and the freedom of that through girded, he then has a woman fulfilling, being the physical representation of this Viking mantra. I thought that was a really cool decision that he made. And we also see right away Einar fulfilling what he said of, it doesn't matter what people say about you. It doesn't matter what people think about you. I know who you are.
Yep.
And he dedicates his life to protecting the new Thorfinn.
Yeah. It's beautiful, and it is very much about the bond between the two of them, that friendship. But it's also about the dream that Einar realizes is so important, more important than any one person. It's
Yeah.
about this dream of founding a world where people can be free, where there is no injustice, no slavery. So it is both his dedication to his friend, but also his determination to preserve this dream. That is behind his act of sacrifice, because he's ready to put himself in between Thorfinn and the crossbow bolt. So yeah,
Multiple times he's willing to do that.
yeah. It's really
Yep.
amazing stuff, and of course, we get a lot about Hild as well here through, and it's something that Yukimura does in all the arcs. A lot of flashbacks are
Yes.
interwoven, similar to the way in the
Yes.
very first we get Thorfinn's story, and Thor's especially, through flashbacks. We get her story through flashbacks, and again, a father relationship is pivotal here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Not only that, she has the father and she has the mentor, or the one that took
The
her
hunter
on after her
guy.
father's death. She has that dual influence on her, just like Thorfinn got to have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that Thorfinn, rather than agreeing with Einar and agreeing with his group of, well, okay, but I've changed. Instead, he very much takes responsibility and says, no, she's owed this desire for vengeance. She's right. And just kind of like facing this physical representation of what he's done and owning up to it, I think is an incredible display of strength and growth and self-awareness.
Yeah.
showing that he doesn't want his past to just fall away now that he's changed, but that he's still responsible for what he's done despite the internal changes he's made.
Yeah. 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 Beautifully said. Yeah, there's just it's a really compelling story, and of course we get the flashback that tells about what Thorfinn did. He killed her father as part of this raid that Askeladd and his band were conducting. And first, her mother is speared through the door. It's absolutely horrific and traumatizing. We don't know what happened to her little sister, but we can assume the worst, probably.
Yeah.
And she feels the guilt of having been separated from her sister, where she felt like she probably somehow should have saved her sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a driving force, I think, is that guilt over her sister's unknown fate. But in spite of all this, you get her father saying, "Forgive," right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he knows. Yep, he knows where her life is going to go after this somehow. He's trying to give her this one last message.
Yep, just like Thorfinn's father did for him, trying to instill in her this last, don't let this shape who you become. And just like Thorfinn, she fails at fulfilling that. She misses the mark and instead seeks out vengeance. And just like in the last arc, we got to see in Einar and in Arnheid the consequences of what he willingly participated in and just really didn't think about the people that were being affected. Here now we have, you gotta think about it. You don't have a choice because it's right here in front of you. This is a direct reflection or a direct consequence of what you've done, whereas Einar was more of, he didn't do it to Einar, but it's the same sort of thing. So it's just escalating. Yeah, and we actually see him do it, which, shoo, it went hard.
Yeah, it's horrible. And we get that whole thing about being the hunter and the hunted.
I am the hunter and you are the hunted. It's just as simple as that.
That's the Thorfinn of the past.
That's the Thorfinn of the past. Yeah, and I love the shading on it.
Yeah, I mean, he is a sinister figure here. It's so interesting how you see, and this is so true of life as well, how trauma gets passed on to people. It's like this is the moment when Thorfinn passes on his trauma to Hild. And it's horrible. And that's what people do often, is they pass their pain and their trauma onto someone else. That next generation passes it on to the next. And you see that legacy of the past, which is an unfortunate thing that happens in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. I mean, it's not required to happen. There are many people that are able to break the cycle, but the cycle does continue for many as well. And unfortunately, Hild was forced into that cycle. The very distinct difference between Hild and Thorfinn is that his vengeance affected many, and he didn't care who he harmed in his quest for vengeance. Whereas with Hild, hers is very focused. She's not destroying other lives in her quest to harm this one. She's laser focused, which has a very different effect.
That may have to do with the mentor figure she gets, the new father figure in her life. Thorfinn gets Askeladd, and she gets this hunter who is a much more, I think, in tune with the world, with life. He understands the give and take. He understands that one day he'll be the hunted, and he'll maybe feed the bear that he would have in a previous time hunted down himself.
Right.
So he has that symbiosis with the natural world, which so she gets a better mentor figure at least.
A little bit more healthy coping that she got to experience, and he really honored her as well in her interest in the crossbow, and him teaching her how to use it, explaining to her why she can't use something like this, and then even giving her opportunities to do the trade and to invent her own that would make it possible to her. But yeah, their relationship is really beautiful. It's short-lived that we get to see it, but I appreciate the role that he was able to be for her.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of cool. There was a little bit. I don't know. If you've read, of course, you've read First Law. If
Mhm.
you read Best Served Cold, there's a moment in here that reminds me. I don't know which was written first, but of her falling down the
Oh yeah,
mountainside.
how Best Served Cold begins.
Yeah, and then how she's discovered by
Uh-huh.
a mysterious older male figure,
Yeah,
and
that's a good connection. I didn't make that connection.
the vengeance thing
Oh
being
yeah.
woven into that.
Oh
Teach me how
yeah.
to hunt, she says. Teach me how to hunt. And we know
Mhm.
she doesn't mean bears necessarily. Long
Mhm.
term, she's determined to get that vengeance.
Absolutely. And we get to see how incredibly smart she is in the beginning with her father, inventing with him, and then with the hunter inventing this new type of crossbow. I love
Yeah,
her mind. And once again, we're seeing just a different kind of strength in her. Different from Gerda, different from any other woman that we've seen previous. She's very intelligent, very hard worker, and knows exactly what she wants. And this time she actually has someone that helps her and supports her to follow
yeah,
that destiny or that path that she wants to fulfill for herself.
yeah. Well said. Because we can see her determination here and
Mm,
teach me to hunt, and then what she's becoming. The Hild that,
that we
and she's
know.
still a younger person version here, but we can see what she's becoming,
Hmm.
and it's not just him teaching her. She brings her inventions to this. She
Hmm.
brings her own mind to this
Yes.
as well. So this sort of sequence of her, we see her learning how to track and how to shoot a bow and all this stuff. The training sequence.
Yeah. And this is
So
all very masculine stuff that she's
yeah,
seeking after. And she's not being put in her feminine place. She's being supported, which is a
yeah.
great parallel. She's paralleling Thorfinn, but obviously she's also paralleling Gerded in a lot of ways.
So true. And the difference being that her mentor is somebody who's a misfit.
Mm,
He's outside of the rules of
right,
society. So he doesn't mind training this young woman.
right.
Whereas Gudrid is stuck within the
Yes,
society where they say, this is what you're supposed to be.
right.
So she's fortunate in her mentor figure again, because he doesn't really care about what people say young women are supposed to be. He
Right.
just sees this person who needs these skills and he passes them on.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have the really powerful imagery whenever her mentor, is killed by the
Yeah.
bear, and she looks at this
Yeah.
bear and sees Thorfinn. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just shows what her goal has been this whole time and ultimately what she's been building up to.
And what does she call it?
Yep,
You
you
monster.
monster. Hmm.
Yeah, and she's not talking
She's
just
not
to the
talking to the
bear, as you
bear.
say.
Yeah.
She's talking to Thorfinn.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's so interesting how he's picked up this theme of how we do tend to see the other as a monster.
Mm,
We don't see the humanity. And that is something that is right from the beginning of this Vinland Saga is very much emphasized,
mm,
is not seeing the humanity, otherizing, seeing that other as a monster.
hmm.
And for her, and justifiably in this case, Thorfinn is a monster. There's no way for her to see his humanity until she sees someone like Einar relating to Thorfinn's humanity.
Hmm.
And it's through that, I think, that she's able to get a glimpse of that. And also because of the mentoring she got from her surrogate father and her own original father with that message of forgiveness.
Absolutely, absolutely. As she's hunting Thorfinn in the snow, and Einar throws himself in front of Thorfinn once again and pleads for her to have mercy, and she has absolutely no interest in that. It is in the memory of her mentors, of her father and her mentor, that stays her hand, reminding
Yes.
her, yeah, of the last thing that her father told her. And then we also get the image of her mentor standing there as well. Powerful,
He
powerful
is
imagery, and very reflective of
really
what we've seen in Thorfinn already as he's battled his demons in different
and it was
ways.
a very near thing because in a very literal way, the legacy of his past just about dragged him down
Mm,
there.
yeah,
Right. And you
absolutely.
see it literalized in that very metaphorical. There's the dead
Yes.
dragging him down, and there she is standing over him.
Hmm.
That's the legacy of his past. And the dream almost gets snuffed out
Yeah,
there.
Absolutely. Yeah, she had the upper hand. She had the right to fulfill her vengeance. Everything was
Yeah.
lining up for her to kill him there. But yeah, it was the memory of those men as well as the pleading of Einar that made her say, "Okay, I don't believe you. These are just words. So I'll track you. I'll follow
Yeah.
you." And she served as the physical tracking for us, the reader, as well, to see as Thorfinn is going to continue to come against conflicts, as he's going to continue to be challenged left and right on these new ideals. If he slips
Yeah.
up, he's got a crossbow on his back, and she will pull
Yeah.
that trigger in a second.
Yeah.
So I think she's a really well fleshed out, interesting character in her own right, but then also serving as that physical representation of Thorfinn refusing to backslide, refusing to waver in what he believes is the right path for him.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Another little unwitting player, perhaps in that moment, is is little Carly.
Yeah,
What was his
Carly.
name? And he's crying as she's about to kill
Mm-hmm.
Thorfinn, and her reaction is, "Make the babe stop
Mm-hmm.
crying," because there's this innocent life here,
Mm-hmm. That will
and
be, yeah,
that's
and
yeah,
she was directly affected by him killing her father, and now here she is ready to kill this man that the baby has bonded to. And you're right, I think that was a
yep,
really big factor in her staying her hand, and not wanting to continue the cycle, which I think is, I mean, like, that's really powerful
yeah,
to display that she did not want to do to others what was done to her, where Thorfinn never took that into consideration.
yep, yep. So she's actually the far more magnanimous person in this
Mm,
case, but also all these factors. So you have, Einar's desire to protect his friend. You have the dream that is being explained to her, and she's initially, how does that help me? How does that bring my family back?
mm-hmm.
You have the presence of this innocent child. You have the mentorship that she got from her father and from the hunter guy, and so all that
Yeah.
adds up to her being able to put the crossbow the other way, and give this thing a chance, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See if she
Becomes
can
part of the
trust him.
crew. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. She
Yeah.
becomes a looming threat to the crew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Adding to the misfit kind of vibe that they have, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they handle her quite well. They accept that she could kill their leader at any moment, but still trying to involve her in everything. I can't imagine. Even whenever Carly at one point like goes up to her while she's on the ship and is trying to play with her death weapons and
Yeah.
like it's not a very comfortable situation they're all in, but they do pretty well. They handle it all right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of fun to see her interactions there, and she's not maybe naturally the most maternal person in the world, but yeah.
Yeah.
But there's something that's growing up there, I think, between this group of people, and that
Hmm.
she's on the outside of, but kind of getting pulled into, nevertheless,
Yeah.
sort of. So,
Yeah.
and there's a contrast with someone else that we know and kind of sort of love and are deeply concerned about. Yep, there.
He's doing so well since we last saw him. Really thriving, isn't he?
Yes, and with all this peace around him, which is driving him nuts. Yeah, poor.
I love that Canute's like, I know how to handle this guy. Let's make him a peacemaker. Let's have him
Right,
maintain peace. It's like,
right.
come on, Canute. Were you trying to punish him? Tell the truth.
Poor Thorkel.
Poor
Yeah,
Thorkel. So funny that he's so lovable, and yet he's so not at ease in the midst of peace and just wants to kill somebody.
yeah, yeah. I mean, in his case, somehow we're okay with it, I
I
guess.
know.
I mean, he's pretty messed up, actually, but he lives by these ideals that there is a kind of nobility to the loyalty and the courage that he embodies, and he's all about honor, and it has an important place in that society. he is a figure of violence, though, and we can never forget that. But he is contrasted in a way to like Sigmund, who's trying in a much more pathetic way to live up to these same ideals. And in his case, we can see more easily how they lead him to very stupid decisions.
I think it's also okay to just acknowledge that sometimes you can have a character that is committing evils and atrocities, but they're a fun personality type to hang out with. So, we don't necessarily have to moralize him. We can acknowledge, you're kind of a bad guy, but I like hanging out with you because I like the way you're written.
Yeah. I mean, this guy here who, because he needs to get his, testosterone out, his
aggression out.
He's killing a bear. It's a very different relationship that say Hild's mentor has with the bear, right?
Oh yeah.
That was a relationship of mutual respect.
Exactly.
That was a relationship of understanding and knowing one's place in the world. This is a relationship of just like, I have to dominate.
Oh yeah, it's the difference of like the one is all is one mantra of, we all exist because of the existence of each other, and we all play into the circle of life, versus dominance, needing to be the greatest, the best, the most strong. And it's a completely different philosophy of life.
Yep. And Thorkel's, you got to think that he's doing some damage in the world. He's, as much as he's full of life and admirable in some ways, he's definitely creating a lot of pain and woe and damage in the world. And you can see it, what he does to this. Yeah, the bear is a predator, but it didn't ask to be there. It didn't want to fight him. This was a completely artificial situation that they threw the bear into, and as a sort of a sacrifice to Thorkel's violence.
Yep, absolutely. And then we also get to see Siggy, also thriving.
I mean, he's a failure, and he has completely not delivered on redeeming his honor there, has he?
No. So they're now in chains, which I think is interesting. They're actually not in chains. It's connected by rope, but we'll pretend. The man whose family is modeled on chains, he's now been enslaved. Which, you can see in his whole demeanor. Everybody else is like, it's all right, we'll be okay. And he's just completely hung over, bent over and ashamed that he's been put in this position.
Yeah, and it's about honor. It really is. Now he's been abased to the lowest of the low, and he'll never live up to his father's legacy. And of course, who happens upon him there in that situation? It's funny. I mean, it's sort of like a big coincidence that all these people are thrown together in this moment, but it was necessary for the story.
Oh, yeah. Totally. And even I find it interesting that he's trying, and they're all trying to be unnoticed by her ineffectually, but this could potentially be his way out. She could help him to freedom, but his pride is so strong that he'd rather her not see him in this state.
Yeah.
Which is a direct contrast to how Thorfinn's postured himself.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and speaking of Thorfinn, this is also the moment when his past is catching up to him.
Yep.
And we begin to sense that he's being caught up in some bigger game involving the Joms Vikings here. And there's a contest of a sort going on for leadership of the Joms Vikings. It's trying to
who's going to have the throne next.
Yep. And it's trying to pull Thorfinn into this in the same way that his father kept getting pulled into it and tried to escape by going off to Iceland, but didn't quite make it because they came for him, right? You sense the same thing happening here.
And coincidentally enough, if I can scroll ahead a little bit and just confirm. Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I'm not spoiling anything. But coincidentally enough, the thing that his father that they tried to pull his father into, and now they're trying to pull him into, who's behind it all, or rather, who's at the heart of it all? Floki, who's trying to get the throne for himself, for his grandson. And now they're thrust together again as well.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it interesting too how when Thorkel meets Thorfinn and you see the eyes, and he even remarks on it. He says, "Ah, you've changed. Your eyes look more like Thor's now."
Yeah, it's beautiful. And
Right?
he does that several times, acknowledging how similar he and his father are.
Mm.
And his connection to his connection to Thorn,
Thor's.
Thor's
So
is
many Thorses in
so
here. Yeah.
many, is very important to the story.
Yeah, it's something that he sort of takes up because Floki also sees those eyes and is reminded of Thor's in a way that's not very, he's scared in a way. He sees him as a threat. So when he sees him, he has that same reaction, but different. Like so, Thorkel is admiring, and he still has that moment haunting him when Thor's left. And I think in the back of his mind, he's still wondering about that way
Oh
of
yeah,
being
absolutely.
perfect warrior, which involves nonviolence. So he's still intrigued by that. So he probably sees that in Thorfinn now, right? Whereas Floki sees a threat. He sees him. He sees those eyes. Those. There's a kind of peace behind his eyes that didn't exist there. A stoicism. It's hard to describe what's in those eyes.
Yeah,
But
well, what he sees is what he saw, as you said, as a threat, even back then in Thor's himself. And we get that flashback of Thor's seeing the way he was conducting himself and looking down on him and judging him. And he didn't want that kind of conscience. He didn't want that kind of challenge to who he was. And so he made an enemy right there. And now he sees that same thing reflected in his son, and he's not interested.
yeah, and he says, "Not those damned eyes again."
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. But of course, Thorfinn rejects the place that they are trying to pull him into, doesn't he? He's even put forward by Thorkel as, "Here's your new leader right here. He's the grandson of the previous, blah, blah, blah. Here's your guy." And Thorfinn wants none of it.
Yeah, and we had a lot of symbolism for the throne in the first arc, and here we are right back to it, but this time it's targeting Thorfinn and trying to pull him in. A different throne, but a throne nonetheless, and one that he does have every right to try to gain because of his heritage of his mother. Again, I love that. His little emphasis towards women. It's not Thor's lineage that gives him this right, though Thor's legacy does play a part in it. But it's his mother's lineage that gives him the right to that throne.
Yeah, absolutely. And all this, of course, is heading toward the, I guess, climax of this book, which is the encounter at the end where, in spite of the fact that Thorfinn wants to avoid all the politics and the violence of this feud within the Jomsvikings, Vikings, they're going after him.
Absolutely.
Right? They're going after him, and he can't avoid it. And who plays a very heroic role in this is Hild, actually. I think it's really interesting how he brings together these two things, the one thread being the machinations involved in the Jomsvikings, Vikings, which is they're trying to pull, the gravity of it is just pulling Thorfinn in.
Yeah.
And the other thread being the relationship between Hild and Thorfinn, which is very much based on the horrible thing that he did to her.
Much like Thorfinn and Askeladd were very tied together. Because of this thread that connected them. And I really feel for Thorfinn here because he really he just wants to be left alone so that he could create a land of peace. And, around every corner he has people trying to manipulate him, trying to force him to serve a role that he doesn't want to serve, hunting him down to make him pay for his past sins. Just like he's getting conflict. He's getting mountains sprouting out of the ground to be blockades to him. And here he is trying to save these people from something that has nothing to do with them, and he doesn't want them to be affected by things that's not their fault. And he saves them, and this child comes to thank him, and this mother is terrified. She asked his forgiveness. This child doesn't know what they want. You know, she obviously doesn't know the heart of Thorfinn. And then you have these men behind him saying, see, you may be wearing sheep's clothing, but you are a wolf. And they know it. So you've got these people, once again, going back to what Einar was trying to assure him of, you've got these people saying, I know who you really are. Trying to, put this persona on him. And can you imagine how difficult it would be to be able to walk forward in who you're choosing to be with your past, constantly saying, I'm still here and you can never escape me.
Yeah, the world does that though, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's coming at him from all angles.
Yep. I love how sinister these Joms Vikings are too. And when inside their helmets, you know, they're not fully human, I guess, in a way. They're trying to very much drag poor Thorfinn, as you said, back into this life of violence and vengeance and all of it. And it is so ironic and so beautiful that it is Hild that kind of saves him in that moment by intervening in this conflict. And it is true that Thorfinn is put into this situation where he has to use violence, although he's using his hands, an echo of what his father Thors did on the boat with Askeladd's men. When he didn't kill a single one of them, I think he just simply kept hitting them with his hands. Thorfinn has adapted that same technique here, and during this fight at the end, he's trying probably not to kill these guys, and he's using his fists.
Yeah,
right?
He'll use the most non-lethal form of violence just to disengage and be able to stop greater violence from happening. Like they were about to kill a man whenever he walked up. Yeah, which I think it's valuable as well. This pacifist ideology that he has to confront the fact that sometimes you do have to confront violent people in a way other than just speaking, but he's still choosing to find ways to make them disengage rather than completely dominating them.
Yep. And he is still seeking that better way. And of course, we can't forget how he's drawn into the fight in the first place. He's trying to protect the people, the innocent people who are being harmed. And he said, I can't let that happen. If I'm going to be all about this better world, I can't let bad things happen to people that are suffering because of something I did in the past. So he steps up for that reason as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's trying to write a story about nonviolence
in a violent
in
setting.
A world that's very violent. In a very violent setting, which is a very difficult thing to do. So my hat's off to him for embarking on this. And I think in the beginning, it was a more natural thing for the violence to just be part of the story. Here, there probably are longer stretches with no violence than in the first arc, for sure. And then even, I think the second arc, the farmland arc, was a little bit less violent than the first. And here we have even less violence, though it happens. I mean, you have this fight at the end and you have the Viking raid, but the emphasis is being taken away, I think, a bit from the violence, because Yukimura is trying to study nonviolence. He's trying to study connection. He's trying to study empathy and love and family. And so I think that the pacing for a lot of people probably feels slower because of that. I no doubt the pacing is slower. I think as each arc has come, I've felt the pacing slow down a little bit. So I'm sure people are picking up on that too. So I like what he does here, and the fact that you do have that very painful moment too, where Thorfinn, you have the child innocently who gives him, after he's participated in what they perceive as saving them from these raiders, and then the mother comes out and grabs her, please don't hurt my child, and he realizes, oh, she sees me as one of them, right? And that's when these other Joms Vikings from the other faction are like, you need to come with us. You're really one of us. You can never really, you're, like you said, the wolf, trying to wear the sheepskin, but you're a wolf. So I guess I'll see where it goes, but I can agree with anyone who says the pacing has slowed from the first arc.
Oh yeah, absolutely it has. The pacing slowing isn't a downfall for me, because I
Uh-huh.
think even in the first arc, it was very clear that Yukimura's priority was in character exploration and
Mhm.
theme discussion.
Yeah.
So pulling back on the pace is no problem for me, and I think that he does execute those two things, what are his goal,
Yeah.
phenomenally. So there's always so much to discuss around each book.
Yeah, exactly. They're really rich.
They
We
are.
can talk forever about the symbolism he's and really, I think, just done a really fantastic job of giving those symbols, not only repeating them, but giving them resonance. Where
Mhm.
each time you see them, there's a slightly new facet to that symbol, a new way of
Mhm.
connecting it to the plot. And that makes me excited, just as excited, maybe even more excited than a great action scene, you know?
Oh yeah.
Uh, that's
Well,
that's
there is action to come. So we've got some good stuff coming for the next couple of books. It'll be
okay.
interesting. I'm excited to see what you think.
Yes, I'm excited too. And so we've got books 10, 11, and 12. Those are the
10, 11, and then a few chapters in 12.
okay.
I'll
Okay.
send you the cutoff point.
Okay. And this might be a useful question for other folks too, but how many of these books are out there now? I know there's a 13. Is that what happens after that?
So 10, 11, and 12 are all we have left. And
Oh,
then
okay.
13 is due to be published in December, assuming it
Oh,
isn't delayed. So
okay.
we'll
So
see.
we're going to be all caught up
I
with,
know.
oh my goodness.
I know. I actually haven't even begun the fourth arc yet because I'm waiting for book 13 to come out so I can read it all
Yeah.
together. So
Uh-huh.
you're almost caught up to me.
Ooh, okay. So I just
Yep.
have to read books 10 and 11 and 12, or just a bit of
The
12.
beginning of 12, yeah.
Just the
I'll
beginning.
send you a chapter number.
Yes, awesome. I have them all already, so I'm excited to do it.
Okay.
And even more excited to discuss them with you.
Yes, it's going to be a blast.
Yep,
All
absolutely.
right. Well, thank you, Philip, for joining me for this discussion. As I said, the first book for this arc is on Philip's channel, and we will continue this discussion. I assume we'll have the next ones up Thursday on your channel, and then Tuesday again on mine. Are we going to keep that pattern?
We can do that. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, please continue to chat with us in the comments for anybody that wants to continue the discussion about the characters, the themes, the plot, all of it. And we will see you again soon. Bye.